Okay, so this just a little video here about braking systems. I'm not going to get too much into the operation because we've got some good videos that explain how things work. And it's not really a video to teach you how to do a brake job. That's something that you don't really want to do on your own unless you know, you're qualified or you're working with somebody that is qualified. That's such an important part of your safety system on your vehicle to have operating brakes. And there's so many little things that potentially can go wrong. You know, you don't torque something right, or you know, you get some air in the system, or all these different things that can happen that could affect your braking operation. But more so, what I want to talk about is sort of what are these wear components, so that you're familiar with, from a maintenance standpoint, what are things that need to be changed. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. So here we have a disc brake system, and just a general operation. We have the hub that turns with the bearing assembly in it, okay? And this rotor, this is the rotor, this would turn with the vehicle. So the CV shaft from the vehicle, if it's a front wheel drive vehicle, would drive this hub, or if it's a rear wheel drive vehicle, this would just turn freely with ground speed. So this would be turning with the vehicle. So we're rolling down the road, our tire would be on here, we're spinning, we're spinning, we're spinning, we're spinning, okay? And then we apply the brakes. So when we apply the brakes, brake pedal gets applied. So I've got a little handle here, but we would be doing this with a brake pedal. We're pushing the master cylinder in. We're creating hydraulic pressure and flow, and we're pushing that hydraulic pressure through this line here into a big piston on the back of this piece here, which is called the caliper. And then that piston takes and turns that hydraulic pressure back into mechanical movement, and we squeeze these two pads against this rotor. So we have a friction member here and a friction member here. So we press on the brake. There's no fluid in here right now, so it won't actually work. But when we press on the brake, it will squeeze this, and that squeezing slows this down and makes it harder to turn. Okay? So what are we looking at here for some components, and what is a brake job? Well, typically, a brake job is generally just a maintenance procedure when these friction components wear out and we have to change them. Every time we step on the brake, we get wear. Okay, so we have this friction member here, the brake rotor, which is a thick metal plate that can dissipate and handle the heat, as well as these friction members down in here, which are our brake pads. Okay, and I have some examples here. I'll actually show you. So every time we brake, they wear, and they get closer and closer and closer, and we get some wear on here, wear on here, wear on here. So to do a brake job, typically we need to change these pads, and then we need to do one of two things to the rotor. If it still has enough thickness, there's minimum specs for this, we would measure it, we can machine this and make it perfectly true again on a specific brake lathe. Or if it's too thin already and there isn't enough material for another service, we would have to actually change this component. Okay? They're not usually too bad, somewhere in that $30 to $50 range. Pads, you can get a set for both sides in about that $90 range, just parts cost. Okay? So that's typically the main components that get changed and wear out. And so what do they look like? Well, here's some worn ones. So this came in from a customer. What you're looking at is this part of the rotor here, and you can see, you know, it would look like that. But they actually wore their brakes down so far that the pad started rubbing on here, and we got metal to metal contact rubbing so long that it wore away this whole piece you're seeing here and got right down into those cooling fins. Okay, so that's the damage that can happen if you leave your brakes unserviced. You can get bad metal to metal contact. So this would be a brake pad where there's no friction material left on it, okay? And it would be rubbing on here, metal on metal. So here's a brake pad. This would be inside here. You can see it right there. And it has a little bit of pad left on it, okay? But not very much. So this is getting very close to running to metal on metal. It's very glazed over from heat. We call that brake fade, when it loses its coefficient of friction because it's becoming so hot. And you can see that it's kind of glazed over and got that really polished look to it. It's quite an old pad, almost down to the rivet, so it's just about metal on metal. Okay. Now what most brake pads have is some sort of warning. So you might think, well, how do I know when to change them? And what they'll do is one of two things. There are some electronic systems where they have a little wire that comes into here, and when the brake pad wears all the way down, that wire grounds out on here and turns on an indicator light. Now that's not super common, but it is on some vehicles. What is more common is this little tab here, okay? Well, that's just called a wear indicator tab. And it's kind of designed to just be like nails on a chalkboard. So typically the pad would be about this thick when it's new, and as we wear down, before we get to metal to metal contact, this little tab starts to drag on here, okay? And you get this high squeal. And most customers, most drivers would be like, oh, that doesn't sound right, I need to go to the shop, okay? And that squeal will happen when you still have a little bit of pad left, okay? Just enough to, you know, get to a shop and get your brake job done. So those are the main components that we service and change, okay? Aside from that, some things that are common with a brake job are checking out the hydraulic system. So we would want to make sure that this caliper didn't have any leaks or things like that. So, you know, if you do have a tire off and you're kind of looking, you know, those are some common things to look for. So any leaks or cracks in the brake line, checking and making sure that we don't have leaks down in where the piston is. So if you're even just looking under your vehicle, if you see any sort of moisture and things around here that looks like brake fluid, then we need to get that hydraulic system repaired. Because what's happening is when you press on the brake, instead of that pressure getting converted to mechanical energy to squish, it's getting lost through that leak that comes out. So that's something that we check for. Spindle wear. So on this specific design, we actually have a caliper mounting bracket. So this bracket here mounts to the spindle here. And so this bracket, we would be checking for wear. Now there's some anti-wear clips you can see in here that often get changed with the brake pads. They'll come with new ones. But sometimes they don't have those, and the brake pads will actually wear little grooves in there. So one thing that you would do in a brake job is kind of try to smooth those out as best you can, maybe with a buffer wheel or something, so that that caliper can float and move on there. Otherwise they kind of get stuck in those grooves. One pad will do all the braking, or it kind of rides and brakes on one side and the pads don't wear evenly. So that's something to check for. Sometimes this spindle comes around, this is all one solid piece to hold the caliper, and then the spindle actually wears. So those are common things that we change and check out on a braking system. So that's pretty much it for a disc brake system. So we'll pause the video and then we'll look at the drum brake.